The school building in Korean manhwa is not a setting. It's a thesis statement. Walk into any popular Korean webtoon, Lookism, Weak Hero, True Beauty, Boys Don't Cry, and you notice immediately that the school isn't a backdrop for coming-of-age stories. It's a system made visible. Corridors become maps of social hierarchy. Uniforms become armor and scarlet letters simultaneously. And the unspoken rules of who eats alone, who gets hit, who gets invited, these aren't plot points. They're the entire architecture. This is different from how Western media uses schools. American narratives ask, can the outsider fit in? Japanese manga asks, can the protagonist transcend their role? But Korean manhwa asks something darker. How complicit are you in this structure? Today, we are examining how the school in Korean manhwa functions as a narrative device for something far larger than adolescence, how it visualizes shame as social technology, how it maps the invisible hierarchies that define Korean adulthood before you're even old enough to vote. Thesis. The Korean school setting operates on a principle that Western narratives have largely abandoned. The belief that social order is not a bug to be overcome, but a feature to be managed. And shame, specifically the weaponization of shame, is the mechanism that keeps that order intact. This isn't speculation. It's embedded in the form of these stories. Notice that in Western narratives, the bully is always punished or redeemed. The hierarchy is always exposed as false or cruel. But in Korean manhwa, particularly those centered on school life, the hierarchy often persists. What changes is your position within it, or more precisely, your understanding of why you deserve your position. Lookism is the clearest example. The entire premise, that an ordinary student wakes up with an attractive body, operates on the assumption that appearance isn't just preference, it's destiny. The story doesn't argue that this is unjust. It argues that this is truth, and the protagonist must navigate it. He doesn't dismantle the hierarchy. He learns to work it. He becomes complicit. That's the Korean school story in miniature. The school setting isn't chosen because adolescence is universally compelling. It's chosen because the Korean education system, one of the most competitive, hierarchical, and shame-saturated in the world, is already a narrative about the sorting of human worth. Manhwa simply makes the sorting visible. Section 1. The Spatial Hierarchy. Let's start with space because Korean manhwa doesn't waste panels on accident. In Weak Hero, the school isn't just larger buildings than your local middle school. It's deliberately drawn as a labyrinth. The hallways multiply. Staircases lead to isolated zones. There are territories, bathrooms controlled by certain students, rooftops that belong to specific groups, cafeterias with invisible seating charts. This isn't realism. This is myth-making. The school becomes a feudal system. And like all feudal systems, it's justified by perceived natural law. The students who occupy the highest social positions are often portrayed with more detailed faces, sharper eyes, cleaner lines. The bullied or invisible characters are sometimes literally drawn with less visual clarity, their features more generic, their bodies taking up less space on the panel. This is a technique Korean manhwa inherited partly from manga, but where manga often uses visual distortion for comedy or emotional exaggeration, Korean manhwa uses it for social mapping. You can read the hierarchy from the art style alone. Take True Beauty. The protagonist Lim Ju-kyung uses makeup to climb the social hierarchy. But notice how the manhwa visualizes this. Before she starts using makeup, she's drawn small, sometimes with visible weight, often with shadows under her eyes. The camera angle is low. We look down at her. After she transforms, the angles shift. The panels center her. The line quality improves. She takes up more visual real estate. This isn't subtle, but it's also not satirical in the Western sense. The manhwa isn't condemning this visual sorting. It's showing what every Korean teenager already knows, that worth is legible on the body, and the body can be engineered. The space of the school also enforces silence. Notice how many bullying sequences happen in empty hallways and bathrooms, in spaces between official institutional areas. The school administration is present but functionally absent. Teachers walk past violence. This isn't oversight. This is the system working as designed. These semi-private spaces exist because the school needs them. They're where power gets exercised without accountability. In Elicede, there's a sequence where the protagonist is being terrorized by stronger students. The violence doesn't happen in classrooms or during school hours. It happens in the parking lot, in the tunnel below the school, in the dead hours. The architecture of the school includes these margins, and the margins are where the real social work happens. This is crucial because it reveals something about Korean institutional life more broadly. The presence of rules doesn't eliminate hierarchy. It just moves the enforcement underground. The school appears civilized at the surface, uniforms, classrooms, teachers, while the actual power structure operates in the gaps. Section 2. The Grammar of Shame. If hierarchy is the architecture, shame is the grammar, and Korean manhwa has developed a syntax of shame that deserves close reading. In Western narratives, shame is often private. The protagonist feels shame internally, and the external world may or may not validate that feeling. In Korean narratives, shame is structural. It's public, it's witnessed, and crucially, it's understood as deserved. Boys Don't Cry is essential here. The entire series operates on an economy of shame and secrecy. The protagonist is a boy who was assigned female at birth and is now navigating a Korean school while hiding this fact. But the series doesn't position shame as something internally generated. It positions shame as the logical consequence of non-conformity to hierarchy. Every time someone gets close to discovering the protagonist's secret, the scene is saturated with dread. Not because the protagonist fears judgment, though that's part of it, but because the protagonist fears being exposed. And exposure means descending the hierarchy. It means becoming visible as something the system cannot categorize. This is different from American trans narratives, which often frame shame as internalized oppression that needs to be overcome. Boys Don't Cry frames shame as structural. It's not false consciousness. It's accurate perception of how the system will respond. And here's what's important. The series doesn't offer redemption through acceptance. It offers redemption through better hiding. The protagonist's goal isn't to be authentic. It's to maintain position. Compare this to Cheese in The Trap. The power dynamics between the protagonist and the male lead are explicitly predatory, but the narrative doesn't frame this as unusual. It frames it as a natural consequence of social position. The male lead has power because he's attractive, because he's male, because he's from a wealthy family. The protagonist accepts this not because of low self-esteem, the character is clearly intelligent, but because she understands the hierarchy. Shame in these narratives is relational. It's not, I feel bad about myself. It's, I am low in the social order and this is accurate information. And the character's arc often involves learning to navigate that position better, not escaping it. Weak Hero takes this further by making shame explicitly physical. The protagonist is small. He's not athletic. By the logic of Korean school hierarchy, he should be bullied. And he is. But the narrative frames his survival strategy, learning to fight, learning to read power dynamics, learning to use people against each other, as maturation, not corruption. Here's the crucial thing. These series don't position the protagonist's adoption of the system's values as a tragic compromise. It's presented as wisdom. Growing up means understanding how hierarchy works and learning to navigate it. It doesn't mean dismantling it. It means internalizing it. This is where we have to sit with uncomfortable implications. These narratives aren't celebrating shame-based hierarchies, but they're not offering escape routes either. They're doing something more insidious. They're normalizing them as inevitable. The shame-based social system isn't portrayed as created by people who could choose differently. It's portrayed as natural law. And, like all natural law, it's better to understand it than to resist it. Section 3. Masculinity and the performance of strength. One of the most distinctive features of Korean school manhwa is how violent masculinity becomes the primary currency of male social position. This is true in manga and Western comics too, but there's a specificity here worth examining. In Lookism, weak hero, hierarchies, and even in more mainstream series like My School President, male characters establish position through demonstrated capacity for violence. But, and this is important, this violence is rarely questioned on moral grounds. It's questioned on practical grounds. The narrative asks, can you win the fight? Not, should there be a fight? Weak hero is almost clinical in how it treats violence as information. When two characters fight, the narrative closely tracks not the emotional stakes, but the tactical reality. Who's stronger? Who understands leverage better? Who can predict the opponent's next move? The series reads like a manual for how to navigate a violence-based social order when you're physically outmatched. And here's what's significant. The protagonist's initial weakness is presented as a problem, not a position from which to gain moral clarity. The series never asks us to question whether this hierarchy is just. It asks us to watch how someone survives within it. In Lookism, the attractive body the protagonist acquires isn't just socially advantageous. It comes with literal power, the ability to fight, to dominate, to take up space. Attractiveness in this context isn't separated from physical dominance. The body that is valued in the sexual marketplace is the body that can win fights. This has a specific cultural logic. In South Korean society, military service is mandatory for men. The experience of physical hierarchy, of being ranked and sorted by your body's capability, is near universal. The school is a preparation for this. It's teaching young men what their bodies are worth in a system that will conscript them and rank them. Shame in these series for male characters becomes bound up with physical inadequacy. To be small is to be ashamed. To lose a fight is to lose social position. To show pain is to invite further violence. Boys Don't Cry exists partially in conversation with this. The protagonist must perform masculinity while having a female body, or more precisely, must navigate expectations attached to a female body while experiencing an internal sense of maleness. The series doesn't resolve this by allowing the protagonist to simply be. Instead, it shows how the protagonist learns to perform adequately within an impossible category. What we're watching isn't individual trauma. It's the internalization of a system that uses the male body as a tool for measuring and enforcing social position. Section 4. The School as Allegory for Korean Adulthood. This is where we have to zoom out and ask, why does the school matter so much in Korean storytelling? The answer is that the school is Korean adulthood, not metaphorically, structurally. South Korea has one of the world's most competitive education systems. Entrance to university depends on a single standardized test. University admission determines career trajectory. Career trajectory determines everything: housing, marriage prospects, social position, likelihood of psychological survival. This isn't hyperbole. This is the actual structure of Korean mobility, and it's decided effectively between ages 14 and 18. So, when a manhwa is set in school, it's not set in a moratorium space where different rules apply. It's set at the exact moment when social destiny is being determined. The bullying isn't a teenage phase. It's a preview of how hierarchy will be enforced in every context afterward. The shame isn't about adolescent insecurity. It's about accurate perception of stakes. And this is why so many Korean school manhwa don't resolve by the protagonist overcoming school. They resolve by the protagonist understanding their position and learning to work it. Because that is the lesson. The goal isn't to escape hierarchy, it's to find a sustainable position within it. Lookism, again, is instructive. The entire premise is that the protagonist gets a second body, a more attractive body. And the narrative celebrates this, not because beauty is superficial and the protagonist finally understands their inner worth, but because a more attractive body is literally useful in the hierarchy. It opens doors. It provides opportunities. The protagonist isn't happier internally. They're positioned better externally. And in these narratives, external position is what matters. Even series that seem to be about rebellion, about standing outside the system, often reinforce it. In Elyseed, the protagonist befriends a powerful student and becomes integrated into a higher tier of the hierarchy. The arc isn't the hierarchy crumbles. It's I found my place in it. Section 5. Class and the Economic Infrastructure of Shame. Finally, we have to acknowledge that this hierarchy isn't pure social performance. It's explicitly built on economic inequality. In True Beauty, the protagonist's transformation through makeup is framed as a personal achievement. But it requires resources, makeup that costs money, time to apply makeup, freedom from immediate survival pressures. The poorest students in these schools rarely get featured, their background. In Lookism, the protagonist's attractive body opens doors partly because attractive people are treated better in capitalism, but also because attractiveness often correlates with family resources, access to fitness, access to healthcare, access to fashion. The school in Korean manhwa is never genuinely meritocratic. It appears to be. Tests are ranked, positions are technically open, but the economic substrate is visible if you look. The students at the top have families. They have resources. Their shame is easier to recover from because they have institutional safety nets. The students at the bottom don't. This is where the school setting reveals something crucial about Korean society's story it tells itself. That hierarchy is natural, that position reflects some mixture of merit and genetics, and that shame is therefore deserved. But the economic infrastructure shows that position is more determined by birth than any system publicly admits. So what is the school in Korean manhwa? It's not a setting. It's an argument. An argument that hierarchy is inevitable. An argument that shame is information, not oppression. An argument that the goal of maturation is not liberation, but better positioning within an unchanging system. This is what distinguishes Korean school narratives from their Western or Japanese counterparts. The narratives don't question hierarchy, they illuminate it. They show how it works, how people survive within it, how people come to desire their own position within it. And maybe that's the most sophisticated form of ideology. Not one that hides the system, but one that shows it in perfect detail while suggesting that resistance is not just futile but foolish, that the only wisdom is understanding. The school in these stories is the world. And the world, according to these narratives, is architecture. Shameful, hierarchical, visible, and completely, totally normal.